Yesterday, we continued our series, You Have Called Me Higher, a study on the book of James. We got into the last few verses of James and a little bit into James chapter 2. In the context of what we were looking at comes right off of where James had just said, do not be hearers of the word only. If you just hear the word, but you don't do anything with it, you're deceiving yourself. And this really goes back to what we talked about in week 1, that one of the big ideas that James is trying to get across is what it is that you and I believe is to impact how it is that you and I behave. And so what he does is he gives us a picture of what pure religion is to look like. And he mentions these two things, to visit or to care after or oversee the orphans, and to also visit the widows and those that are in need. And so we looked at two different ways that we could do that. And we talked about that there are a lot of needs that are happening around us on a daily basis. The ministries that we have here at Madison, but also the ministries that are wonderful all around us in our community. There is so many opportunities and so many resources available to serve our orphans and our widows. And then he also mentioned this, that we are also to keep ourselves unspotted from the rest of the earth, unstained from what we see around us. And we do know that there is things that are happening in our culture on a daily basis that are impacting us, and little by little, if we're not careful, invading our lives. And he tells us that that's where getting into that word and understanding what it means, but also applying it, comes into play. And so right after that, we then got into James chapter 2 when it discusses an issue that was happening within the church, and that is an issue of favoritism and discrimination. That they were treating rich people a certain way, giving them the good seats, but to those that were poor, they were making them stand or sit in places not, in the good seats. And he said that if you do this, you're making distinctions among yourselves, but also you're judges with evil thoughts. And we see this as a part of Jesus's ministry too, that the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those that he had a big issue with because they were so focused on the external, it's that external emphasis for them that produced an internal pride. And so the big idea behind James chapter 1 and 2, as we talked about yesterday, was to leave a trace. That wherever we go is to leave this trace of grace, that people will see Jesus Christ through our actions, the way we take care of those that are in need, but also the way that we see other people around us, no matter what they look like. That as God's people, we're to be the most famous for our compassion and our generosity. And so what we did as we gave you that action step from yesterday was our encouragement was this. Number one, to pray to God and to pray that if there is some type of prejudice that may be in our heart, that he'll bring that to the surface and we'll repent of it. And the second thing was this, to find an orphan or a widow or somebody in those two categories to serve, to reach out maybe to one of the organizations that we support here at Madison, Agape of North Alabama, or support one of our foster families here. There's so many different ways to do that, or get involved in our Solos ministry that serves our widows, many different opportunities and a lot of different things. And then we summed up the whole text from yesterday by mentioning a few things that I want to remind you of, is that fruitless faith is an oxymoron, that if there is true faith, there is going to be works that are going to be produced. And the other thing is this, that when love does flow through you, it doesn't just bless you, but it blesses other people. And the third thing that we mentioned that James is really getting at, because he had just said, listen, I know you've heard and you've listened to a lot of things, but make sure that you're not educated beyond the level of your obedience. And the final thing we mentioned yesterday is that every single human being matters to God, whether or not God matters to them or not. So let's go out and to leave that trace of grace, showing other people God's love through not just what we believe, but how we behave.